cartoons versus anime is a stupid argument. On a core level, they are the same thing. Storytelling through animation. Of course, there's going to be some differences, especially on the preference of genre and of course culturally. And if you prefer one over the other is absolutely fine with me. But when you put one side of the animation fandom down versus the other, then that's when it just gets really petty. Especially when there is absolutely no animosity between the industries. My Hero is heavily inspired by Marvel and Deku is directly inspired by Spider-Man. Marvel and My Hero even had a crossover. And if they were truly enemies, we wouldn't have today Rick and Morty the anime and a Powerpuff Girls anime. Those two things existed because obviously someone in Japan really liked those shows. There is such a thing as a Westaboo, believe it or not. Same thing with cartoons. Obviously there's a lot of cartoons out there that are inspired by anime. Last Airbender is a big one. There's also Teen Titans, which obviously had some inspiration in the art style. Amphibia, a few episodes of The Amazing World of Gumball, OKKO, and recently My Adventures with Superman. But it seems to be within fandoms that there always has to be a side you have to pick, that you have to put one down over the other. That to me is just nonsense. Now let's take My Adventures with Superman. It's a unique retelling of the story of Superman that's also very respectful to the character of Superman. And stylistically and even in a writing standpoint, it's heavily inspired by anime. One of the great inspirations that they took from was Sailor Moon. And for that reason, the people who watch the show, fans of the show, affectionately call it the Superman anime. But I've heard people call it a sorry attempt at the West trying to cash in on the success of anime. No, they doing this because they want to, because they love the character of Superman and they love anime. If they didn't love anime, they wouldn't have made it the way they made it. One person I saw tried to compare it to Jujutsu Kaisen, saying it's not comparable. Yeah, duh, it's not comparable. There are two different shows, two completely different storylines. One's a romantic comedy adventure, the other one is a dark fantasy. And yes, on a purely writing standpoint, Jujutsu Kaisen is better. But that doesn't put down My Adventures with Superman because they're going for different things. And My Adventures with Superman has succeeded in accomplishing those goals in a very engaging and entertaining way. But the one that is really petty to me is that in the fandom there is a joke that Superman and Lois looks like Guts and Casca from Berserk, and people get so offended by that. It's a joke because they physically are similar to the characters. And I've heard people get so upset saying, how dare you compare this show to that abomination or that show, that lame show. If you don't like the show, that's fine. But to be so petty as to take a joke about two characters looking similar and be that worked up over it, I don't know anymore. And like I said, it's fine if you don't like the show. And I can personally understand why some people wouldn't. So let's take a show that is almost universally loved, The Last Airbender. There is so much love for this series and it absolutely deserves it. Is it perfect? No, nothing is perfect, but it's as close as perfection as a cartoon can be. But there's reviews like this, saying that it's a try-hard anime, a mimic, a knockoff, and that they'll stick to real anime. But this pettiness does go both ways. The number of times I've seen someone who likes anime or has an anime profile picture, they're usually called cringe or a degenerate. And there's definitely a few cartoon fans that would put them down for it. Probably assuming the only anime that exists are the degenerate, really cringy ones. And those animes do exist. But to be absolutely fair, there are plenty of cartoons that are really gross. Anime can come in any kind of genre or style. Like with a few recent shows, it could be dark and serious like Jujutsu Kaisen. It could be really wholesome like Spy X Family, deep and emotional like Frieren, romance, action. Anime has it all. It could be as grandiose as an epic isekai fantasy or something pretty dumb, but still funny, like an isekai fantasy. To assume that anime is just degeneracy incarnate means you haven't watched enough. And there's also the assumption that cartoons with deep meaning and great storytelling is few and between because cartoons are usually aimed towards children, and that is a load of baloney. Let me take away the adult-oriented animated series like Invincible, Primal, Arcane, and I'll even take away a lot of the older series like Last Airbender, Ben 10, Teen Titans, and let's focus on like the newer cartoons. In the Nickelodeon show Harvey Beaks, Fee makes a friend with an elderly person. They get along, they get into mischief, they were both troublemakers. After saying goodbye to him for the night, after a day of mischief, he passed away in his sleep. She is in denial of this reality, but when it finally hit that the truth is she will never see him again, she just weeps and weeps and weeps. And she has to deal with the reality of moving on and honoring his memory. Or how about in Wander Over Yonder? Wander is a pacifist. For hundreds of years, he's been being the good guy that solves wars, creates friendships, helps people any way he can, and turns villains good, using friendliness, kindness, and overall pacifism. He is the purest good guy you can think of. But what happens when someone pure evil comes along that wants nothing but destruction? She doesn't have a bad backstory or anything. She just wants death, destruction, and mayhem because it makes her laugh. He freaks out because the reality of the situation is that goodness and pacifism cannot save everyone, especially when someone is just determined to be the biggest jerk in the room. It's a harsh reality for him because he is not violent, he is good. But how can you protect everyone from the purest of evils if you're the purest of good and refuse to commit violence? Or how about Anne Boonchoi? She gave her life for everyone. Or how about Scrooge McDuck that isolated himself from everyone, including the things he loves the most, adventures, because he lost someone he cared about deeply, almost going bankrupt to find her so she can return to the children she left behind. Or even Donald, to sacrifice everything he has for children that weren't even his. Or let's get even deeper, Transformers Prime, where characters like RC deals with PTSD because of a million-year civil war and the fact that she keeps losing her friends and partners in very, very gruesome displays. At least gruesome to Transformers. Is that childish? Is that not deep? And if we consider all the ones that I left out, then it gets deeper. Messages of conflict in The Last Airbender, Batman staying with a child that's dying, Starfire dealing with racial prejudice. And all these shows are meant for children, and yet they have messages like this. And the animations are beautiful. Anime is famous for being flashy and very professional looking, but there are cartoons that have absolutely gorgeous animation. Lego Monkey Kid alone is one of the most amazing pieces of animation work I've seen. Now the battle between anime and cartoons is not the main meta of the internet. A lot of times I know that there's people who like both. But the problem is, the ones that are so petty as to put one down over the other are the loudest. No one should feel shame to watch anime or cartoons or prefer one over the other, especially when we all together get so much crap and judgment from the mainstream media saying animation is for kids. The fact of the matter that a animated film has its own subcategory, like a participation award, instead of being just nominated for Best Picture in general. Do we really want a civil war amongst animation fans? Like I said before, animation is one of the greatest mediums for storytelling there is in history. It brings imagination to life. Every tear we shed, every laugh we've had, every thrill, every adventure we've been on and loved through animation is incredibly special. It doesn't matter if it's from the West or from the East. It's all storytelling. It's all animation.
Open the back door.
Why are you always late?
45 seconds is plenty of time. Hey, I'm coming.
Every day the same thing.